1310 WIBA and Ask the Experts with Wisconsin Capital Management. Great website if you haven't had a chance to check it out. Today is the day to head right there, wizcap.com. That's WISCAP.com. Again, wizcap.com. Get more information about Wisconsin Capital Management, what makes them so unique. You can learn more about the folks, whether it's Tom Plumb, Nathan Plumb, the whole team at Wisconsin Capital Management. You can also, the best feature, set up an appointment right online. Again, that's at wizcap.com. That's Wiz, W-I-S, cap, C-A-P.com, wizcap.com. Who are Tom and Nathan Plumb? Oh, they're on with us right now. We get to know them. Tom Plumb, chartered financial analyst with Wisconsin Capital Management. Tom, how you doing this week?
Oh, doing great, Sean. Thanks for having us, and it's great to be with you today.
It's always great to chat with you. And Nathan, how have you been?
Hey, Sean, doing great as usual. Happy to be on.
It's good to have you both along. Of course, Nathan Plumb, certified trust financial advisor, also with his executive MBA. And this week, we're going to be talking about a shutdown. And as I look at our show notes for this week, folks are in for a really good and really informative show. But before we get to all the really good information, something we were talking about before the show, Tom, which is trying to answer the question about what exactly is a shutdown, and more importantly, what exactly is this shutdown? It's not as simple as people might think.
No, it's not, because when you do a little bit of research and check back, sometimes they say there's been 10 shutdowns since 1976, and some of the sources say there's been 22 or 23, that this would be the 23rd one. So what they mean by a shutdown is basically some part of the government does not pay its bills, and that could be where it just wasn't authorized at one point to make a certain type of a payment, or it might be something more broad and general. And this one that we're in right now is a broad and general one, where there are some entities that are still being paid. The government's still paying interest on its debt, for example. It's still paying the Social Security so far, though we don't know if they'll continue to do that in October. And there's a number of other what they call non-essential items that are being either furloughed or shut down, such as the national parks, for example.
As we talked this morning, and it's fascinating as to kind of what has in the past counted and what did it and who you ask and those type of things. And, what's fascinating to me is obviously government business. It affects all aspects of life. And certainly when it comes to investments and other things, of course, there is something for everything there. And as we look, Tom, we think about what's been going on the last couple of weeks in the news. A lot of the headlines have been about that anxiety, about the federal government shutdown. Now, started first of this month, and looks like it's probably not going to be reconciled anytime soon. So as we talk this morning with Nate and Tom Plumb, we're going to get some details. And Tom, let's talk a little bit about the reach of a government shutdown, and this one in particular.
Well, again, it's thousands of government employees are going to be furloughed. Some of them are being asked to come to work, but there's no assurance that they'll be paid. Today, the government says that they're going to pay the military, but again, there's some question about whether or not they can pick and choose some of the things that aren't directly authorized. One of the things that causes a considerable amount of frustration among taxpayers is that the congressional members are still being paid.
That is insult to injury there for sure, Tom. And Nate, when we look at this stuff and kind of discuss this, it's funny because when you hear politicians talk, and I don't care what side of the aisle they're on, they all seem to think that they all say that this is unacceptable, but it seems to be one of the very rare things as far as statements that we have bipartisan support on. Yet here it is, it's happening. We are in a government shutdown, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. So obviously, probably most people think that running the government is a good thing. And I think, both sides agree to that. But again, when you look at the details to how things are set up in our government, these type of things are in the Senate are subject to what's called the Byrd rule. and that means that you need to have 60 votes in the Senate as opposed to a simple majority. This rule forces the parties to have to work together, which obviously is sometimes a difficult thing. And that's why that these debt crises are not really about the debt. It's just that these political posturing, and this is the event that forces these right now two parties to really hammer each other. So unfortunately, even with this debt crisis over, this is it's going to rear its head, over and over again. So this won't be the last one either.
Yeah, unfortunately, as we kind of look at kind of how things have played out here in America, and of course in Congress as well, it does not seem. Unfortunately, I think you're right on with that, Nathan, that this is not going to be the last of them. As we talked this morning with Nathan and Tom Plumb of Wisconsin Capital Management, the website wiscap.com. That's WISCAP.com. Don't forget, if you miss any part of the show, you can always listen back on the website. They put the podcasts right up at wiscap.com. Also, great opportunity as you listen to the show, you get this great information. Make sure you're sharing it with your friends and family. You hear a particular topic that might be of interest to them, you can always, of course, share right from wiscap.com. Also, while you're there, you can set up an appointment right online. Again, that's WISCAP.com. And Tom, you think about the people that are directly impacted, whether they are currently furloughed or however they're phrasing it, or whether there is the potential for them to do it. Obviously, that has a very direct impact, but there's also those who are part of that political football who may not have that direct impact on their lives, but there are some pretty far-reaching consequences for everyone, aren't there?
Definitely, Sean. Initially, you feel for the government employees and their families, and no one likes to be called a non-essential
Sure.
employee. But it does affect the general economy. First of all, in information, because the government is a main source of how we understand what's happening to prices, consumer prices, for example, and other economic activity. And as this uncertainty continues, then it starts to have a broader impact throughout the whole economy, not just in information that's available, but in information that's necessary to make decisions. So it definitely starts to affect the broader economy.
So let's talk then, Nate, about the effect on GDP and the growth. What are we seeing there as far as some of the numbers and some of the information in that area?
Yeah, the reason that you just don't see a huge whole scale downdraft is that actually there's kind of a delayed and muted effect when this happens. So some estimates suggest that each week a shutdown subtracts 0.1% of annualized GDP. So if our annual GDP growth runs about 3%, a 3-week shutdown could already reduce some economic activities. So it's kind of a muted effect at first, and then it grows bigger and bigger. And then the thing that you have to remember is that the private sector drives 85% of the economy. So we, the people, the consumer, still drive the economy. So that's why you don't see any huge sell-off in the stock market and things that seem counterintuitive. The government only affects about 15% of GDP. So that's why you're seeing, things not react the way you think they would.
And that's been surprising to me in a good way. I always like when these pleasant surprises about the stock market and other things. But Tom, stock market maybe not so much. The bond market, on the other hand, there is something we can see there, isn't there, Tom?
It has historically.
Okay.
When you look at the stock market, there's been different effects, but on the bond market, in general, what we call the flight to safety, a lot of people start buying bonds, and interest rates actually go down modestly during the past shutdowns, and that may seem counterintuitive. Here the government's not paying their bills, so I'll go and buy their debt. But historically they've continued to pay that debt, and again, it's what they call risk off, where a lot of people start to get concerned about what it might mean for the overall economy And so they flow into safer investments, and bonds are typically considered safer than stocks, and government bonds are considered safer than corporate bonds. So you start to see a lot of money flow in there. And historically, rates have dropped almost a 0.5% during any prolonged shutdown.
That is fascinating as we talk this morning with Tom Plumb and Nathan Plumb of Wisconsin Capital Management online, wiscap.com. That's WISCAP.com. Really interesting when you look at some of the historical data. And of course, what you'll often hear folks say is, well, this time is different. I think Mark Twain says history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. We'll get the details from Nate and Tom about this time. Is it truly different? Is this warnings of maybe something bigger? Is this something that maybe folks are overreacting? And we'll find out how this time may or may not be different from previous shutdowns. With the details from Tom and Nathan next. In the meantime, if you haven't been to the website, head on over to wiscap.com. That's WISCAP.com. That's where you'll learn more about Wisconsin Capital Management, learn about Tom. You can learn about Nathan and everyone at Wisconsin Capital Management. Most importantly there, though, is an opportunity to make an appointment. All you got to do is head on over to wiscap.com. That's WISCAP.com. We're going to continue our conversation with Nate and Tom. We will do that next as Ask the Experts with Wisconsin Capital Management continues right here on 1310 WIBA. 1310 WIBA and Ask the Experts, hanging out this morning with our good friends Tom and Nathan Plumb of Wisconsin Capital Management. Tom, chartered financial analyst. Nate, of course, a certified trust financial advisor with an executive MBA. And of course, they come to us from Wisconsin Capital Management. You can learn more about Tom and Nate on the website, wiscap.com. That's WISCAP.com. You can get to know the guys. You can also get to know Wisconsin Capital Management. Best feature, though, is the opportunity to set up an appointment right at wiscap.com. That's WISCAP.com. You can also listen back to this and previous shows, podcasts as well. Talking this week about how the government shutdown affects investors. And one of the things that I have noticed, especially when it comes to politics, is things that have happened before. Every time they happen again, folks automatically say, this time it's different. This time it's unique. Folks will say, well, we've been through it before. We survived. We persevered. Maybe we've come out stronger. People say, well, this is different. This is different. And we hear that warning about some kinds of bubbles in the economy and other things. How, Nate, is this time different?
Yeah, this site is a little bit different because we have this something that you probably heard about is this AI theme that's really kind of dominated the markets. And so, trying to think about what AI does for you, but what it does for the stock market, what you've seen is that it's really making a lot of these companies more productive. So, if you are one of these people out there using Chat GPT, right, instead of writing a letter that took you 10 minutes, right, might only take you like a minute or two. So just think of that at scale at huge companies. So that's the savings of productivity and time is the different thing this time. So but there are a lot of things that could happen right now. But so the market could stay flat, it could go up, it could go down. So the case for being flat is that, the stock market's at all-time high, the price level is up, but so are relative price levels, especially when you have a service-based economy. So that's one saying, like, oh, those things are good and things will probably just level off. So that's a plausible possibility, right? And then if you're thinking they're going up, right? The Fed just lowered interest rates on September, 25 basis points, and actually raised them or lowered them by 1% over the last 50 months. So that's a huge stimulation to the economy. And so that's a case that you could actually, boy, this economy could really go up and still have a very rational argument. And then lastly, down. The down ones get a lot more press, but it's usually unlikely in stock markets. So, if you think about the S&P 500 every rolling 10 years, you can expect it to go up, 7.5, 8 times out of 10, right? So the down case is usually not the case, but there's a lot of political issues out there that are not in a vacuum, right? And especially this trade uncertainty, that's something in daily announcements of we don't like this country, and vice versa. That's definitely creating a drag on world economics, and so that's a very plausible point for the bears out there.
That is interesting, Nate, when you mention, I see sometimes some of these headlines, and I would think traditionally here, shutdown, that would cause the markets to adjust and drop down or rise up. Whereas it seems like certain statements and certain things tend to really have that effect these days. And Tom, as you kind of bring you into the conversation here, complacency is there as well, isn't it?
Well, when we talk about a stock market being near or at an all-time high, there is a certain amount of complacency built in there, and there's expectations. Historically, when we've had a shutdown and the market in the first few shutdowns during the Ford and Carter years, the market actually went down. Then the next few times, it actually seemed like it was more sanguine and the market didn't do much. The last time in 2018, and which was so far the longest shutdown, the stock market actually went up 10% in a month. So you get people start to think that this shutdown is a non-event, and historically, after a shutdown, the stock market has gone up, and it's average going up double digits over the next 12 months. But this time you wonder, because as Nate was mentioning, there's some very strong potential fundamental issues, but they're already built into the stock market. So again, that creates this short term, and short term meaning immediate, where we are right now, uh, impact where you are very uncertain and you're very concerned, because we've seen that the market can be very volatile on some just potential short-term news item one night might drive the stock market down. In fact, dramatically on last Friday, we saw the stock market go down almost 3% in certain segments.
As we talked this morning with Tom and Nathan Plumb of Wisconsin Capital Management, the website whizcap.com. That's whizcap.com. And Nate, Tom just mentioned there that word uncertainty, and you think about things of whether it's trade and tariffs, those type of things. Those are really one of those things that investors do pay quite close attention to, don't they?
Yeah, obviously being in Madison, Wisconsin, or surrounded by a lot of the farming community, and a lot of these commodity prices really get fluctuated by global trade. So historically in Wisconsin, if you grew soybeans, one of your major export markets was China, and
Mm-hmm.
now that's disrupted. But you can't really pivot and plant a new field, every 2 months just on these different commodity prices. So it definitely has, it hurts people like in the local area, and so that's something that you always have to be conscious of. So usually, once you kind of define the rules, even
Mm-hmm.
if you don't like the rules, at least everyone has a playbook to play by, and that's what usually corporations like. So people have kind of built a forecast for this type of range in their uncertainty, and they're quote unquote flexing their supply chains, like trying to make sure that we keep their prices lower, going to the consumer. But it's a lot of stress when you're not focusing on actually operating your business. You're worried about your supply chain.
I always feel like markets are kind of like as a passenger in the car. You want the driver to be decisive. There is nothing that makes you a little more uneasy than riding around with somebody that's driving a car. And my wife is perking up right now. There's nothing that drives me more crazy than indecisiveness when it comes to making decisions on the road. And it seems like the stock markets kind of perceive things the exact same way. Talking this morning with Tom and Nathan Plumb of Wisconsin Capital Management, online whizcap.com. That's WISCAP.com. So obviously, shutdown has real potential when it comes to short-term implications. And of course, depending on how long this lasts, I got to ask you, Tom, what, if any, potential long-term implications may there be?
Well, one of them, of course, is potential in the healthcare sector,
Mm.
because the impasse seems to be about the medical subsidies and the government's role in healthcare. So, however that is resolved, will have some profound impact on that sector of the economy. And we're trying to understand the impact on drug price controls that were just announced last week. So, as always, there's going to be some winners and some losers, and it's going to be based on how volumes change and the profit incentives that are going to be allowed once the government deals with these issues.
And Nate, one of the things I know I saw in the notes, and obviously I pay attention to the news flow working at News Talk Station. The news flow does have an impact here, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, the news flow definitely affects, just how, the general people feel,
Mhm.
psychologically, right? So either it kind of gets you way up or way down, especially how much you're watching social media these days.
Yes.
But the key thing is actually to go back to your analogy of driving a car, right?
Mhm.
So when you're hearing all this news flows, you feel like you're hesitating, kind of get frozen, type of get stuck. And I guess my dad and I were kind of like Formula One race drivers. So we're driving fast and making decisions. Not that all our decisions are as correct as those Formula One drivers, but we're finding, opportunities, we're finding
Mhm.
disruptive technology and things that you can invest in, and hopefully kind of moderate your volatility at the same time with our process. So we have a dynamic, balanced process that we're always looking at, always adjusting, always tweaking, and so we're not stop being complacent either. We're very active, and that's the formula that's worked for us. And anyone that's been complacent, eventually there's entropy and things will erode away, no matter what you do.
End up getting passed, getting lapped, that's for sure. And that's one of the great things about starting a conversation with Tom and Nate of Wisconsin Capital Management. You can do just that at wiscap.com. That's WISCAP.com. You can talk with Tom and Nate and find out if your investment plan is set to meet your needs and goals. Again, and all you got to do is head on over to wiscap.com. Start that conversation about your investments. Again, the website, wiscap.com. That's WISCAP.com. Tom, great talking to me this morning. You have a fantastic day.
Oh, thanks, Sean. And as Nate was saying,
Yeah.
it's really important that you have a dynamic view of what your asset allocation is and things. And you can't just follow some old time formula, but you have to be able to adapt using the principles and the same fundamental foundation reasoning, but you have to be able to adapt to the current environment as well as understand what the longer term potential is.
Love the perspective. Nate, it's always great as well to hear from you. You enjoy this fantastic day.
All right, see you next week, Sean.
News comes your way next, right here on 1310 WIBA.